영어 동화 세상 리틀팍스.
Iggy the Incredible Inventor. Chapter 1. My First Invention. It all started one Monday morning at school. It was my idea, my first invention. We were sitting in class, coloring maps. I don't understand why our teacher, Mrs. Romano, makes us color maps. She acts as if we are in first grade instead of fourth grade. Does she really think we still like to color?
Use bright colors,
Mrs. Romano said, walking around the room. I colored North America green. I colored South America orange. I colored Africa yellow. Then I started working on Asia, which is a really big continent. My hand was getting tired. I stopped to give it a rest. My friend Molly leaned toward me. "Psst, Iggy," she whispered. "My hand hurts from coloring." "So does mine," I said.
Quiet, please.
Said Mrs. Romano.
All I want to hear is the sound of crayons moving across the paper.
Mrs. Romano wanted to hear the sound of crayons moving across the paper. I was so tired of that sound. Why aren't there machines to do coloring? I thought suddenly. Then, kids wouldn't have to work so hard. That was when I got my idea. A truly incredible idea. It could make me, Iggy, a famous inventor. I told Molly about my idea on the way home from school. "Wow," said Molly. "If your idea works, we'll never have to color by hand again." Our school is near the apartment building where Molly and I live. Our apartments are both on the 5th floor. That means we have to climb a lot of stairs every day. Phew, I wish our backpacks weren't so heavy, I groaned. "Me too," she agreed, panting hard. I said goodbye to Molly and then went into my apartment. My mom was on the telephone in the kitchen. She waved to me as I walked by. I went into my bedroom and dumped my heavy backpack on the floor. One of its straps fell just over the chalk line on the floor. My older brother Tate had drawn the line to divide our room into 2 sections.
"Hey, get your backpack off my side of the room!"
Tate ordered me. "It's my room, too," I shot back.
No arguing, boys,
Called my mother from the kitchen. I decided to go down to the 4th floor and see my friend Josh. I wanted to get away from Tate. Plus, I needed help with my invention. I knocked on the door of his apartment, and Josh answered right away. "Hi, Josh," I said. Josh invited me in. "Do you know that toy that Sparky likes?" I blurted out. Sparky is Josh's pet hamster.
"His seesaw?"
Josh asked. He walked over to Sparky's cage and lifted up the toy. "Yes, that's it," I said. "Can I borrow it? I want to make one just like it."
"Why?"
asked Josh. "I have a brilliant idea," I said. "I'm going to invent an automatic coloring machine. My hand will never get tired from coloring again." Josh's eyes lit up.
"Cool,"
he said.
"How will it work?"
"You'll see," I told him. Let's show Sparky's seesaw to Mr. Calabria, the building superintendent. He has a lot of wood downstairs. We went down the steps to the building's basement. Mr. Calabria was in his workroom surrounded by tools and wood scraps. He smiled at us.
Is your kitchen faucet leaking again, Iggy?
He asked. I shook my head. Our faucet is working fine.
Then do you have another problem?
He asked.
He has something, Mr. Calabria.
Josh burst out.
But it's not a problem. It's an amazing, incredible idea.
Iggy the Incredible Inventor. Chapter 2. Another great idea. Mr. Calabria helped Josh and me make 3 coloring machines. Josh's little sister Jenny helped too. So did their dog, Bunch. He picked up all the pieces of wood we dropped on the floor.
This is the best invention in the world.
Josh told me. Josh always says things like that. He's the best friend in the world. I sure hope these coloring machines work, said Jenny, sneezing. Everything makes Jenny sneeze, especially wood scraps and dust. Even Josh's hamster Sparky makes Jenny sneeze. I'm going to bring the coloring machines to school tomorrow, I said. Wait until the other kids see them,
You'll be the most famous kid in school.
said Josh. Achoo! Jenny sneezed. The next day, I took my coloring machines to school with me. Mrs. Romano was very impressed with my invention.
What a creative idea, Iggy.
She said,
Our hands will never get tired from coloring again.
said Jake. Even when we have to color Asia, said Ruby. Everyone laughed, remembering how long it had taken to color Asia. Molly, Ruby, and Evan volunteered to try out my new invention. I showed them how to tape their crayons inside the round part of the machine. Move the machine around so the crayon colors, I explained. Let the machine do all the work. Evan started filling in North America with blue.
This is really hard, Iggy.
He said as he moved the automatic coloring machine around. Ruby frowned. It's even harder than coloring by hand. Well, at least your hand doesn't get tired, I pointed out. Look, my crayon broke, Ruby said with dismay.
Mine did too,
said Evan. Molly looked at me. Iggy, this is a brilliant invention, she said. I grinned proudly. Really? Yes, said Molly. But there's only one problem. What's that? I asked. It doesn't work, said Molly. I hated to admit it, but Molly was right. That day when I got home from school, I felt really bad. My coloring machine was a big failure. I threw the machines in the back of my bedroom closet. I didn't want to ever see them again.
Mom, Iggy threw his invention junk in my half of the closet,
Yelled Tate.
Boys, please be quiet.
Called Mom.
I'm talking on the telephone.
I lay down on my bed to think. I wished I could think of a really wonderful new invention, one that actually worked. There was a knock on the apartment door. It was Molly. Iggy, Caswell has disappeared again, she cried. Caswell is Molly's little brother. He loves to go exploring in our old apartment building. He likes to look for hidden treasure, but sometimes he gets lost. Once we found him in the basement. Another time, we found him on the roof. I couldn't imagine who would hide a treasure on the roof. Everyone helped look for Caswell, except for Mom, who was still on the phone.
Caswell, where are you?
We called.
Caswell, you come here right this minute.
Ordered Molly. Ruff, ruff, barked Bunch. But there was no sign of Caswell.
Caswell! Caswell, come back!
We shouted. We looked in the basement and up on the roof. We even looked in our tiny backyard, but all we saw was a cat. She was wearing a bell around her neck that tinkled whenever she walked. That was when I got my next brilliant idea. It would help us find Caswell whenever he got lost. It was the best idea I'd ever had. But first, we needed to find Caswell. Iggy the Incredible Inventor. Chapter 3. The Awful Thing.
Caswell!
Josh yelled.
Where are you?
Said Molly.
He's got to be here somewhere.
Said Mrs. O'Donnell. Everyone was still calling for Caswell. All at once we heard a small, muffled voice.
Here I am.
Caswell appeared from a dark space under the stairs. He was completely covered with dust.
Achoo!
Molly sneezed a few times.
Look what I found under the stairs!
Said Caswell. He was clutching an old penny.
Caswell, I'm so glad to see you.
Cried Mrs. O'Donnell.
When we couldn't find you, we were all very worried.
I found a treasure!
Said Caswell, proudly holding out his penny.
You are my treasure.
Said Mrs. O'Donnell, hugging Caswell.
He's a pest. That's what he is.
Said Molly. But she was smiling as she ruffled her brother's hair.
I'm glad we found you.
I couldn't wait to get back to my room to plan my new invention. It was going to be great. Caswell would never be lost again, at least not for long. The first thing I needed was a bell. Luckily, I knew just where to find one. My mom keeps a box of Christmas tree ornaments in our coat closet. One of the ornaments was a beautiful brass bell. I went in the closet and opened the box. I found lots of ornaments, including a colored glass ball and a gingerbread house. At last, I found the brass bell. After that, I got some string. I tied the bell to the string and jingled it. It made a nice, loud ringing noise. If we could get Caswell to wear the bell, he'd jingle wherever he went. So we'd always be able to find him. I decided to bring the bell to school tomorrow to show Molly and the other kids. Then they would see that I was a really good inventor. By this time, I was getting really hungry. I went into the kitchen to see what Mom was making for dinner. But Mom was still talking on the phone. There was nothing cooking on the stove, and there were no good smells coming from the oven. What's the matter with Mom lately, I wondered. All she does is talk on the phone. And tonight, it looked like she had forgotten to make dinner for Tate and me. I was about to look for something to eat when I heard something strange.
I'll have to rob a bank.
My mom said into the phone, and then she laughed. Oh my gosh, my mom works as a bank teller. But that wouldn't turn her into a bank robber, would it? I decided I'd better tell someone about it right away. So I ran to Molly's apartment and knocked on the door. When Molly answered, I could smell something really good coming from her kitchen. It smelled like roast beef, which is my favorite food. Molly, my mom is planning to rob a bank, I cried.
What?
Molly blinked in surprise.
What on earth are you talking about, Iggy?
I heard her on the telephone, I explained. She said she was going to rob a bank. She even laughed about it. Molly stared at me.
You know what?
She said. What? I said. I was hoping Molly would know how to stop my mother from robbing a bank. Molly shook her head.
You like to invent things, Iggy, and now you're inventing stories.
Iggy the Incredible Inventor, Chapter 4, The Greatest Idea Ever. Maybe Molly was right, I thought when I got home. Maybe I was inventing stories. Still, I knew what I had heard. My mom had clearly said, I'll have to rob a bank. I didn't invent that. I'd heard her say those words with my very own ears. Mom finally did serve dinner that night, but it was just cold sandwiches. And she definitely seemed worried about something. As we sat at the table eating, she stared off into space. Mom, what are you thinking about? I asked suddenly.
What?
She said, startled. I repeated my question. What are you thinking about?
I was just thinking about all the bills I have to pay,
Said Mom. My stomach did a little flip. So you're really worried about money?
Iggy, stop being weird.
Said Tate. My mother patted my hand.
You should be thinking about homework, Iggy, not bills.
She said. Then she quickly started talking about something else. I got up early the next day to walk to school with Josh. He likes to get there early, and this morning I needed to talk to him. I got downstairs just as Josh was headed out the door. Can I walk to school with you? I asked. I have something I want to tell you,
Sure.
said Josh. I'm worried about my mom, I blurted out as we started walking.
Why?
Asked Josh. I think she needs money, I said. She's worried about paying bills,
My dad worries about bills too.
said Josh. We walked past the Green Apple Supermarket. That's where Josh and Jenny's dad works. He brings home lots of food for dinner, like steak and apple pie. So Josh didn't have to worry about having good dinners either.
My dad even works on the weekends to make extra money for our family.
Josh went on.
He performs magic shows. He's working on a new trick using a one-way mirror.
What's a one-way mirror? I asked.
It's a mirror on one side,
Explained Josh.
but on the other side, you can see through it, like glass.
Oh, I said, nodding. I was pretty sure I'd seen mirrors like that on TV police shows. Maybe I could invent a money-making machine, I said, thinking out loud. I could print thousands of dollar bills, and then we'd be rich. Josh stopped and looked at me.
Iggy, that's the worst idea in the world.
Boy, I thought. Josh either really likes an idea, or he really doesn't like it. What's wrong with a money printing machine? I asked him.
Printing money is a crime.
Said Josh.
If you invent a money printing machine, you could go to jail.
Jail? I echoed. Oh well, forget that invention then. A second later, Josh and I passed the candy store near school. My mouth watered as I looked at all the delicious candy. I really wish I were rich now, I murmured. Then I could buy this whole candy store. I dug into my pocket and found some change. Josh had some too. Together we had enough to buy a chocolate candy bar. We decided to save it for lunchtime. If only I knew what my mom was thinking, I said as we walked on. Then I would know what to do. Josh shook his head.
Grown-ups are pretty mysterious. You'd need a really great invention to figure them out.
That's when I got my greatest idea ever. What if I could invent a magic thinking box? Then I'd be able to read people's thoughts. Iggy the Incredible Inventor. Chapter 5. Mrs. Romano's Surprise. At school, I opened my backpack to show Molly the bell for Caswell. But the bell was gone. Before I could tell Molly about it, Mrs. Romano made a surprise announcement.
Class, I have something exciting to share.
Are we going to have an ice cream party?
Asked Colby.
Or take a trip to the zoo?
Said Ruby.
Maybe we're getting a class pet. I'd like a monkey.
Said Kristen. Mrs. Romano smiled.
No, we're not getting a monkey. There's going to be an invention convention in our own city,
She said. I sat up straighter in my chair.
An invention convention will be held 1 week from today.
Mrs. Romano said.
Students can exhibit their inventions, and there will be prizes for the best ones.
An invention convention, I thought, forgetting about my bell problem. Wow! Molly raised her hand.
What do you get for first prize, Mrs. Romano?
First prize is a blue ribbon and $100.
Our teacher told us. I let out a low whistle. $100! I wondered if that was enough to help my mom. Then I started thinking about the magic thinking box again. That was an even better invention than Caswell's bell. If I could make a box that worked, I might win a prize. And then I could figure out what my mom was so worried about. That afternoon, Josh, Jenny, Molly, and I walked home from school together. Did your teacher tell you about the invention convention? I asked Josh.
Yes,
Said Josh.
I'd like to invent an automatic homework machine.
We'd never have to do homework again,
Said Jenny. Molly was chewing bubble gum.
I'd like to invent gum that doesn't lose its flavor,
She said, popping a big bubble.
Iggy, you could build your magic thinking box for the convention.
Said Josh. You just read my mind, I told him.
What's a magic thinking box?
Asked Molly. It's a special box, I explained. You put it on your head, and then I can tell what you're thinking. Molly looked puzzled.
But how does it work?
She wanted to know. I was glad we had reached our apartment building by then, because I didn't have an answer for Molly's question. The truth is, I had no idea how my magic thinking box would work. I just hoped it would work. Upstairs, my mom was on the phone again.
Well, I just don't have enough money.
She said. I couldn't believe it. She was talking about money again, too. I went into my room and threw my backpack on the floor. Tate was doing his homework.
Move that backpack.
He yelled.
It's on my side of the room again.
Just barely, I argued back.
Boys, please.
My mother called.
I'm on the telephone.
I kicked my backpack under my bed. At least Tate couldn't say that was on his side of the room. Then I flopped onto my bed. I needed to think about my magic thinking box. How would it work anyway? I wanted to win a prize at the invention convention more than anything. I also wanted to find out what was bothering my mom. But how was I going to make a magic thinking box? I'd need real magic for that. I remembered Mr. Chen's one-way mirror. You could see through it on one side, Josh had said. But on the other side, it was just like a regular mirror. Maybe a one-way mirror was exactly what I needed for my new invention.